Welcome, dear listener, to The Bloody Handkerchief, a Miss Marple mystery told in 5 velvet-sharp chapters. Pull up a chair, pour the tea, and keep your wits as close as your knitting. In St. Mary's Hollow, even the roses have secrets, and they're about to bloom. A single crimson handprint on linen, a throat slit with surgical grace, 5 suspects, 1 locked room, and a secret buried beneath the roses for 80 years. Who bled? Who lied? And why does the handkerchief keep appearing? Clean. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Stain That Whispered. The rain came sideways that Tuesday, a spiteful, needle-thin assault that turned the cobbled lane of St. Mary's Hollow into a mirror of black glass. Each droplet struck the thatch of Miss Marple's cottage like a thrown pebble, drumming a warning no one inside was awake to hear. The postman, Mr. Higgs, hunched beneath his oilskin cape, his bicycle wobbling under the weight of sodden letters. He had delivered to Primrose Cottage every weekday for 32 years and could navigate the garden path blindfolded. Yet today the iron gate stood ajar, an inch, no more, but enough to snag his eye. A single white square fluttered from the downstairs window like a surrender flag caught in battle, only it wasn't white. A bloom of scarlet soaked the linen, spreading outward in a shape that looked, to Higgs's startled gaze, almost like a tiny, deliberate hand. He braked hard, boots skidding. The bicycle toppled, envelopes scattered across the wet flagstones. Higgs paid them no mind. He stared at the handkerchief, at the way the blood had seeped into the embroidered border. Roses, he thought, though the colour made them look more like poppies after a shell burst. A gust snatched the cloth. It danced, twisted, then slipped free of the latch and drifted to the sill inside. The window itself was cracked open, a dark mouth exhaling the scent of damp wool and something sharper. Copper, unmistakable even through the rain. Miss Marple. Higgs's voice cracked like a schoolboy's. No answer, only the rain, louder now, as if the sky leaned closer to listen. He should have fetched Constable Polk. Protocol, procedure, the tidy boxes of village life. Instead, Higgs found his hand on the gate, pushing it wider. The hinges screamed, a sound he would replay in nightmares for months. Roses flanked the path, their heads bowed under the downpour, petals bruised to wine. 1 thorn snagged his sleeve. He felt the prick but didn't stop. The front door stood unlocked, another anomaly. Miss Marple locked her door at dusk and unlocked it at dawn with the precision of a Swiss watch. Higgs stepped over the threshold. The hallway smelled of beeswax and lavender, but beneath it coiled that iron tang again. A single lamp burned on the console table, its flame trembling, though no draught stirred the air. Higgs' boots left muddy crescents on the rug. He called again, softer, as though volume alone might wake the dead. Miss Marple, it's Higgs. Posts here. Silence answered, thick as felt. To the left, the parlour door stood ajar. He nudged it with his knuckles. The room unfolded in lamplight and shadow. Chintz armchair, knitting basket, a half-finished jigsaw of Canterbury Cathedral. And in Miss Marple's own rocking chair, her chair with the faded cabbage rose cushion, sat a woman. Not Miss Marple. This woman was smaller, bird-boned, her silver hair pinned in a bun that had come loose in strands like cobwebs. Her head lolled at an angle no living neck could hold. A dark line crossed her throat, neat as a tailor's chalk mark, and from it seeped a slow, viscous red that had already soaked her lace collar and pooled in the hollow of her lap. Higgs's knees buckled. He caught the doorframe, breath soaring in and out. The woman was Agatha Wren, widow of the late Colonel Wren. who had terrorized the village choir with his tuning fork for decades. Agatha, who wore cameo brooches and smelled of violet water, who had taken tea with Miss Marple every Thursday without fail. Now she stared at the ceiling with eyes the color of washed-out denim, reflecting the lamp's flame like twin coins at the bottom of a well. On the gate-leg table beside her lay the handkerchief. The blood had dried to a rust-brown map, the embroidered roses now black-scented. Higgs's gaze snagged on a detail. The stain wasn't random. It formed a perfect outline, a child's hand, fingers splayed, thumb crooked. Someone had pressed the cloth to a wound with intent, not panic. A floorboard creaked overhead. Higgs's heart lurched. He spun, staring at the staircase. The sound came again, deliberate, unhurried. Footsteps descending. He should run, should shout, but his legs felt rooted in the rug's faded vines. The steps reached the landing, paused. A shadow stretched across the wallpaper, long and thin, then withdrew. The front door slammed shut behind him. Higgs hadn't touched it. He whirled. The bolt shot home with a metallic snick. Rain hammered the windows. The lamp flickered. In the parlor, Agatha Wren's corpse rocked gently, as though the chair itself breathed. Higgs's mouth opened, closed. He backed toward the kitchen door, hands groping for the knob. "Mr. Higgs," said a voice from the shadows beneath the stairs. Calm, precise, with the faintest trace of amusement. "You're letting the damp in." Miss Jane Marple stepped into the light. She wore a dove-grey raincoat, sensible galoshes, and carried a black umbrella that dripped a steady rhythm onto the tiles. Her cheeks were pink from the wind, her eyes bright as a sparrow's. In her left hand she held a small paper bag. Higgs caught the scent of warm scones from the bakery. "I was expecting tea," she said, "not tragedy." For a moment, Higgs could only gape. Then words tumbled out. "Mrs. Wren, she's dead, Miss Marple. Throat cut, blood everywhere, and the handkerchief." Marple's gaze flicked past him to the parlor. Something shifted behind her eyes, a shutter closing. She set the scones on the console, peeled off her gloves one finger at a time. "Yes," she said softly. "I can see that." She moved past him, light-footed, and stood over the body. Higgs watched, frozen, as she lifted the handkerchief between thumb and forefinger, holding it to the lamp. The blood had soaked through to the reverse side, but the embroidered initials remained legible. A.W., Agatha's own. "Curious," Miss Marple murmured. "The cut is precise, almost surgical, yet the cloth was applied after death, not during the struggle. See how the fibers are flattened. Pressure, not a frantic wipe." She tilted her head. "And the shape? A handprint, but not hers. Too small." Higgs found his voice. "There was someone upstairs. I heard." "Indeed." Miss Marple's tone remained conversational, as though discussing the likelihood of rain. "Whoever locked us in wishes to contain the scene. Or perhaps to contain us." She crossed to the window, peered out at the streaming garden. No footprints on the path, too much rain. But the gate was open. "You noticed?" Higgs nodded dumbly. "Someone left in a hurry, then returned to tidy up, or to wait." She turned the handkerchief over. "This wasn't the murder weapon. Too delicate. The blade will be steel, narrow, double-edged. A paper knife, perhaps, or a scalpel." A thud overhead. Dust sifted from the ceiling rose. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "The attic. There's a loose board by the chimney. Gives a splendid view of the lane." She moved toward the stairs. Higgs lunged to stop her. "You can't, Constable Polk." "We'll arrive in 7 minutes," she said without pausing. "He cycles from the station, and the hill slows him. We have 6.5. Higgs scrambled after her. The stairs creaked under their combined weight. On the landing, A faint scent of tobacco lingered. Agatha's nephew, Lionel, smoked Turkish cigarettes. The attic door stood ajar, a slice of darkness beyond. Miss Marple produced a small torch from her coat pocket, where had that come from, and clicked it on. The beam swept across trunks, a dressmaker's dummy draped in cobwebs, a stack of yellowed magazines. In the corner, a folding chair faced the dormer window. On the seat lay a single white handkerchief, pristine, folded into a perfect square. A single red rose petal rested atop it like a seal. Miss Marple's breath caught, barely audible, but Higgs heard it. "Someone watched the lane," she said, waited for Higgs to discover the body, then descended to lock the door. She lifted the petal. Beneath it, the handkerchief was monogrammed JM, her own initials. Downstairs, the front door rattled. A fist pounded. "Miss Marple, Higgs, open up." "Constable Polk, right on schedule." Miss Marple slipped both handkerchiefs into her pocket, the bloodied one, wrapped in her clean spare from the bag of scones. She turned to Higgs, her voice low. "Not a word about the attic, Mr. Higgs, not yet. Our visitor left us a calling card, and I intend to return the favor." They descended as Polk's key scraped in the lock. The constable burst in, helmet askew, mustache bristling. "Good Lord, what's happened?" Miss Marple stepped forward, hands clasped demurely. "A tragedy, Constable. Poor Mrs. Wren appears to have met with foul play. I've only just returned from the bakery. Mr. Higgs can vouch for me." Higgs opened his mouth, closed it. The weight of her gaze pinned him like a butterfly. Polk strode into the parlor, swore under his breath. "Right, no one leaves. Higgs, fetch Dr. Haydock. Miss Marple, you'll stay put." "Of course," she said meekly. As Polk knelt by the body, Miss Marple drifted to the console table. With a motion too swift to follow, she palmed the bag of scones, now containing the bloodied evidence, and tucked it into the umbrella stand among the walking sticks. Her fingers brushed a third handkerchief, this one pinned beneath a porcelain cat. It was damp, smelling faintly of rose water and something acrid, chloroform perhaps. She left it where it lay. Outside, the rain eased to a whisper. Inside, the cottage held its breath. Miss Marple poured 3 cups of tea from the pot she'd set to steep before her walk. Earl Grey, 2 sugars for Polk, lemon for herself. She handed Higgs his cup with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Drink up, Mr. Higgs. We'll need our wits about us. The game, as they say, is afoot." In the parlor, Agatha Wren's blood cooled on the cabbage roses. Upstairs, the attic window stood open a finger's breadth, letting in the scent of wet earth. And somewhere in the village, a clock struck 10, its chimes drifting over the rooftops like a warning no one heeded. Miss Marple sipped her tea, listening to the rain taper into silence, and felt the first tug of the thread that would unravel everything. Chapter 2. Threads of yesterday, the sun rose like a reluctant witness, spilling pale gold across the cottage floorboards and turning the dried blood on the rocking chair cushion into a map of rust-colored continents. Dr. Haydock had come and gone, his black bag snapping shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Agatha Wren's body lay shrouded on a stretcher in the garden shed, awaiting the coroner's van from Much Benham. Constable Polk had stationed young P.C. Dodd at the gate with a notebook and a look of heroic constipation. Inside, Miss Marple moved with the quiet efficiency of a woman arranging flowers for a funeral that had already happened. She had persuaded Polk to let the principal witnesses gather in her parlor rather than the drafty village hall. "People speak more freely among familiar teacups," she'd said, and Polk, flustered by the scent of fresh scones and the memory of his mother's knitting circle, had agreed. Now the room brimmed with the uneasy rustle of suspicion. Lionel Wren, Agatha's nephew, stood by the mantel, rolling a cigarette with fingers that trembled just enough to betray him. He was 42, handsome in the way of men who photograph well in uniform, but wilt in civvies, his moustache waxed to 2 defiant points. He wore a charcoal suit that had once been expensive. The elbows shone like polished pewter. Across from him sat Clara Pettigrew, Agatha's maid of 15 years, her apron starched so fiercely it could have stood alone. Clara's eyes were red-rimmed but dry, grief held at bay by the same discipline that kept her seam straight. She clutched a small enamel brooch shaped like a swallow. Every few seconds her thumb worried the clasp, as though it might fly away. Dr. Felix Harrow, the antiquarian, occupied the chintz sofa with the proprietary air of a man who believed all furniture secretly belonged to him. His waistcoat strained over a belly earned from rare sherry and rarer exercise. A gold monocle dangled from a ribbon, catching the light whenever he turned to appraise a new object. He had arrived clutching a leather folio for notes, though Miss Marple suspected the notes were already written in margins of books no one else could read. Last came Josiah Bragg, the gardener, rain still beading on his tweed cap. He refused a chair, planting himself by the window with arms folded like a sentry. Soil darkened the creases of his knuckles. A single thorn scratch traced a red comma across one thumb. He smelled of wet earth and something sharper, creosote, perhaps, or guilt. Miss Marple poured tea from a brown Betty pot painted with violets. The cups chimed softly as she passed them. Steam curled like incense. "Lionel," she began, voice gentle as thistledown, "you mentioned yesterday that your aunt intended to change her will." Lionel's cigarette paused halfway to his lips. "Did I?" His laugh cracked. Must have been the shock. Aunt Agatha changed her will more often than her library books. Last month, it was the Cats Protection League. The month before, some missionary in Borneo who'd sent her a crocodile tooth. Clara made a small sound, half sniff, half snort. Mrs. Wren gave to every cause with a stamped envelope, but the tooth was ivory, Mr. Lionel. She kept it in the music box. Dr. Harrow leaned forward, monocle flashing. "Ivory, you say, pre-1947. Fascinating. The ban—" "Later, Doctor," Miss Marple cut in smoothly. "Clara, you found the music box open yesterday morning." Clara's swallow brooch clicked. "Yes, ma'am, on the escritoire." Lid up, ballerina twirling, though the spring was broken, the tooth was gone, and there was a smell, like lilies left too long in water. Josiah shifted, boots scraping. "Greenhouse lilies," he muttered. "Mrs. Wren wanted them for the church fete. I cut a dozen at dawn." Miss Marple's needles, ivory, heirlooms from her own aunt, clicked in a soothing rhythm. She was knitting something small and scarlet. No one had dared ask what. "Lilies at dawn," she echoed. "Yet the church fete is Saturday. An odd choice for a Tuesday corpse." Lionel crushed his unlit cigarette. "Are you implying—" "I imply nothing," Miss Marple said. "I observe." Clara, the music box played The Ash Grove, a Welsh tune. "Your mother was Welsh, wasn't she?" Clara's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Yes. Mam used to sing it while scrubbing steps. Mrs. Wren said it reminded her of someone." The room stilled. Outside, a blackbird trilled, reckless with spring. Dr. Harrow cleared his throat. "Speaking of reminders, I happened to appraise Mrs. Wren's library last Michaelmas. She possessed a first edition of M.R. James, Ghost Stories of an Antiquary, inscribed, to A.W. from J with undying affection, 1943. The J was inked over, but the impression remained. I offered £500. She laughed, said some stories were worth more than money. Lionel's jaw tightened. Uncle Jasper died in 43. Submarine went down off Malta. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows many things, Miss Marple murmured. Josiah, you planted roses along the south wall last autumn. Peace roses, cream with pink edges. Yet yesterday I noticed one bush pruned to the ground. Why? Josiah's gaze flicked to the window. Green fly. Had to burn the canes. Curious. The infestation was confined to one plant. Some diseases travel, he said. Miss Marple set her knitting aside. The scarlet square revealed itself, a tiny mitten, no larger than a child's. Let us travel then, back to 1943. Agatha was 25, a code breaker at Bletchley. Her fiancé, Jasper, presumed lost. Yet submarines sometimes surface years later, do they not, with secrets aboard. She rose, crossed to the mantel, and lifted a silver frame. A sepia photograph. Agatha, in Wren uniform, arm linked with a naval officer whose face had been scratched out so thoroughly the emulsion flaked like dandruff. Clara gasped. That was in the music box, behind the lining. Indeed. Miss Marple turned the frame. Tucked into the velvet backing lay a folded scrap of linen, another handkerchief, yellowed with age, embroidered with the same tiny roses. In one corner, faint brown stains formed letters. J lives. Lionel lunged. Miss Marple stepped aside. He caught only air and the photograph, which clattered to the hearth. Enough games, he shouted. My aunt was senile, hoarding rubbish, imagining conspiracies. I came to protect her, not to inherit, Dr. Harrow supplied silkily. The estate is hardly rubbish, the dower house, the investments, the stamp collection alone. Stamp collection. Josiah's voice cut like a spade through clay. She promised me the cottage garden, said I'd earned it, tending her roses 30 years. Clara stood so abruptly her chair rocked. She promised me the sapphire brooch, the one from her mother, said I was the daughter she never had. Miss Marple raised a hand. Silence fell, brittle as frost. Promises, she said, are threads. Pull one, and the tapestry shifts. Clara, fetch the music box. Josiah, the pruning shears from the shed. Doctor, your folio. Lionel, sit down. They obeyed as though charmed. Miss Marple laid the yellowed handkerchief on the gate-leg table. With tweezers from her knitting bag, she unfolded it. Inside nestled a single sheet of onion skin, typed in purple carbon. My darling A. If you read this, I failed. The sub was scuttled to protect the Enigma variant. I swim for shore, wait for the roses, burn after reading. J. The room exhaled. Dr. Harrow's monocle dropped. My God, a genuine Bletchley artifact. Priceless. Lionel's face drained to parchment. She kept it, all these years. Clara began to cry, soft, hiccuping sobs that shook her shoulders. Josiah stared at his earth-stained hands. She used to say the roses knew, said they bloom brighter where secrets were buried. Miss Marple refolded the letter into the handkerchief, then into a fresh linen square from her pocket. Secrets fertilize strange gardens. Clara, the music box. Clara returned, cradling the rosewood box as though it were a child. The ballerina had been removed. In her place lay a brass key and a second photograph, this one crisp, modern. Agatha and a man in his 80s, both smiling beneath the peace roses. The man's eyes were Jasper's, unmistakable despite the decades. On the back, in Agatha's spidery hand, he came back. We buried the past beneath the roses. Some debts are paid in silence. Miss Marple turned the photograph to the light. Jasper survived, returned in secret, lived quietly, perhaps as a groundsman, a librarian, a bookseller. Agatha protected him, but secrets rot if not turned, like compost. Dr. Harrow reached for the photograph. Miss Marple whisked it away. "Josiah," she said, "the pruned rosebush. You burned the canes, you said. Yet the ashes in the incinerator are cold, days old. Someone dug deeper." Josiah's knees buckled. He caught the windowsill. "She asked me to, last week. Said the roots were tangled with something that shouldn't see light. I thought bones, maybe a cat. But it was a tin, rusted. Inside." His voice cracked. "Letters, more letters, and a medal, naval, with his name." Lionel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "So the old fool kept a ghost alive, and for what? To leave me nothing." Miss Marple's gaze pinned him. "To leave you everything, perhaps, or nothing. We shall see." She crossed to the French doors, flung them open. The garden breathed damp earth and lilac. Beneath the pruned rosebush, a rectangle of soil had been disturbed, the turf replaced like a bad toupee. "Constable Polk will want to see this," she said. "But first—" A scream split the air, not human, metallic. The music box, triggered by Clara's trembling hand, spun into life. The ash grove tinkled off-key, the ballerina socket empty and accusing. From the hallway came a soft thud. Miss Marple turned. Pinned to the cottage door by a single hawthorn spike gleamed a pristine white handkerchief. In the center, embroidered in crimson thread, bloomed a single rose. Beneath it, in the same thread, 2 words. "Your move." The knitting needle stilled in Miss Marple's hand. Outside, the blackbird fell silent. Inside, 5 people stared at the door as though it might open onto 1943. Miss Marple smiled, a small, fierce thing. "Someone is stitching a pattern only I can see," she whispered, "and the next square is mine." She closed the doors, drew the curtains, and turned the key in the lock. The parlor became a confession box, the tea grown cold, the secrets rising like steam. Chapter 3. The Garden's Confession. The sky over St. Mary's Hollow had the colour of a plum left too long in the bowl, deep violet at the edges, bruise yellow where the sun bled through. Thunder prowled the horizon like a caged lion, and the air carried the metallic promise of a storm that would not be gentle. Miss Marple stood on the cottage doorstep in a mackintosh the shade of wet slate, her umbrella furled like a sword. Behind her, the parlour curtains twitched. 5 pairs of eyes watched from the gloom within. She had dismissed them with the calm authority of a headmistress, sending prefects to their dormitories. "Stay inside. Touch nothing. The garden will speak soon enough." Constable Polk had protested, something about preserving the scene. But one look from Miss Marple had sent him skirling back to his bicycle with orders to fetch spades and lanterns. Now the lane lay empty save for the wind worrying the telegraph wires into a thin, mournful song. Miss Marple descended the 3 stone steps. The disturbed rectangle beneath the rosebush waited, its edges crisp as a freshly dug grave. She knelt, heedless of the damp seeping through her stockings, and brushed away a layer of soil with the flat of her hand. The earth was cool, loamy, fragrant with crushed petals and something older, decay, perhaps, or memory. Her fingers found the corner of a tin box, rusted the colour of dried blood. She worked it free with the patience of an archaeologist, unearthing a sarcophagus. The lid resisted, then gave with a sigh. Inside, cocooned in oilskin, lay a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, the shade of forget-me-nots. A naval medal, Distinguished Service Cross, rested atop them like a paperweight. The ribbon was frayed. The medal itself gleamed with the care of hands that had polished it nightly for decades. Miss Marple lifted the top letter. The envelope bore no stamp, only a single word in ink gone sepia. Agatha. Footsteps crunched behind her. She did not turn. "Find what you are looking for, Miss Marple." Lionel's voice carried the brittle edge of a man who had rehearsed sarcasm in the mirror. "Looking," she replied, "is a matter of knowing where to begin. You might start with the spade, Mr. Wren. The ground is softer than your conscience." He hesitated, then snatched the tool from the shed wall. Clara hovered at the threshold, apron twisted in her fists. Dr. Harrow lingered beneath the laburnum, folio clutched like a hymnal. Josiah Bragg had vanished, slipped away while the others argued over who should hold the torch. Miss Marple noted his absence the way a chess player notes a missing pawn. Lionel drove the spade into the earth. Soil flew in dark commas. The hole deepened. Roots snapped like brittle bones. At 2 feet, the blade struck metal. A second tin, larger, its lid sealed with wax the color of clotted cream. Miss Marple pried it open with the penknife she kept for pruning lavender. Photographs spilled across the grass, dozens of them, edges curled like autumn leaves. Agatha in her 20s, laughing on a bicycle. Agatha in a deck chair, pregnant, hand resting on a swell hidden beneath a floral frock. Agatha older, arm linked with a man whose face had been carefully razored from every image. Only his hands remained, broad, scarred, a sailor's hands. In one corner of the pile lay a birth certificate, folded so often the creases had worn through. Name, Wren. Jasper, Lionel. Mother, Agatha Wren. Father, unknown. Lionel dropped the spade. "That's impossible. I'm Lionel. My mother died in childbirth. Aunt Agatha raised me." Miss Marple's voice was soft as moth wings. "Raised you, yes, but not as a nephew, as a son." Clara made a sound like a kettle coming to boil. Dr. Harrow's monocle clattered to the path. From the shed came a metallic clank. Miss Marple rose, knees creaking. "Josiah," she called. No answer, only the wind, and the first fat drop of rain striking the tin like a gunshot. She crossed the lawn, galoshes squelching. The shed door stood ajar, a slice of darkness exhaling the scent of creosote and lilies. Inside, shadows pooled thick as ink. A single bulb dangled from a frayed cord, swaying though no breeze stirred the air. On the workbench lay Josiah's cap, brim crushed as though stepped on in haste. Beside it, a trowel, its blade dark and wet. Miss Marple lifted the trowel. The substance was not mud. It carried the unmistakable sheen of blood, still tacky. A trail of droplets led across the concrete floor to the far wall, where a stack of terracotta pots had toppled. Behind them, a loose plank gaped like a missing tooth. She knelt, shone her torch into the cavity. A third handkerchief, white linen, monogrammed A.W., lay folded into a square no larger than a matchbox. Crimson soaked one corner, but the rest bore embroidery in progress. A rose, half-finished, its stem curling into letters that spelled "forgive." Thunder cracked overhead. The bulb flickered, died. Darkness swallowed the shed. Miss Marple straightened, heart steady as a metronome. She pocketed the handkerchief and stepped outside. Rain lashed sideways now, turning the garden into a watercolor run amok. Lionel stood beneath the laburnum soaked to the skin, staring at the birth certificate as though it might bite. "Jasper Lionel," he whispered. "My father. Alive?" "Alive until recently," Miss Marple said. "The medal is warm to the touch. Polished this morning. Someone kept vigil." Clara appeared in the doorway, face pale as milk. "The music box. It's playing again. On its own." Dr. Harrow followed, folio clutched to his chest. I've seen enough. This is a matter for the police. Lightning forked, illuminating the garden in stark white. For an instant, every leaf stood out like etched glass. In that flash, Miss Marple saw Josiah, crouched behind the greenhouse, trowel raised, eyes wild as a cornered fox. She moved without thinking, umbrella snapping open like a shield. Josiah Bragg put it down. He rose slowly, rain streaming from his cap. "She promised me the garden," he said, voice raw. 30 years I tended her roses, watched her bury her secrets, and for what? So her bastard son could sell it to developers. Lionel took a step forward. "I'm not—" "You are." Josiah's shout cracked like the thunder. "I saw the surveyors last month. You brought them, smiling, measuring, planning your bloody bungalows." Miss Marple's voice cut through the storm. "The trowel, Josiah. Whose blood?" He looked at the blade as though seeing it for the first time. "Not hers. Mine. Cut my hand on the tin. I panicked. Thought you'd blame me." Dr. Harrow snorted. "A likely story." Clara's scream sliced the air. She pointed past them toward the cottage. The parlor window glowed, candlelight, though the electricity was out. Shadows moved within. 2 figures, one tall, one stooped, locked in a silent dance. Miss Marple ran. The others followed, slipping on wet grass. She burst through the French doors into a room transformed. Every candle from the mantel had been lit. They flickered in jam jars and teacups, throwing grotesque shadows across the walls. The rocking chair faced the hearth, empty now, but the cushion bore a fresh stain, dark, spreading. On the gate-leg table lay the music box, lid open, ballerina spinning, though no key turned the mechanism. The ash grove played backward, notes warped into something mournful and wrong. Beside it rested a 4th handkerchief, this one soaked through, the rose embroidery complete, the word forgive now joined by a second. Me. A man stood in the corner, half hidden by the grandfather clock. He was tall, stooped with age, but his eyes burned with the fierce clarity of youth. Rainwater dripped from a naval greatcoat decades out of fashion. In his right hand he held a straight razor, its blade catching the candlelight like a sliver of moon. "Jasper," Miss Marple said quietly. He inclined his head. "Miss Marple, you always did see through fog." Lionel stumbled forward. "Father." The word hung in the air like a noose. Jasper's gaze flicked to his son, softened, then hardened. "You were never meant to know. Agatha wanted you safe from the past." Clara whimpered. Dr. Harrow edged toward the door. Josiah blocked it, trowel still in hand. Miss Marple stepped between them. "The razor, Jasper. Put it down. Agatha's death was not your doing." His laugh was a dry husk. "Wasn't it? I came back last night, wanted to see her one last time before the end. Found her already gone. The handkerchief, she'd kept it pressed to her throat, trying to stop the bleeding. I took it, left another in its place. A signal. Thought someone would understand." "Someone did," Miss Marple said. "But signals misfire." Clara saw the blood. Thought to frame Dr. Harrow for theft. Lionel feared disinheritance. Josiah guarded the garden's secrets with his life. Jasper's hand trembled. "I only wanted to bury her properly, with the letters, the truth." Thunder shook the windows. The candles guttered. In the darkness, the razor clattered to the floor. Miss Marple knelt, picked it up. The blade was clean. "You didn't kill her," she said. "But you know who did." Jasper nodded toward the window. "Look." Outside, lightning revealed a figure in the rain. Small, hooded, moving fast toward the lane. The maid's apron fluttered like a white flag. "Clara," Lionel breathed. But Clara stood beside him, trembling. The figure was someone else entirely. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "The game shifts," she murmured, "and the garden has one more secret to yield." She opened the door. Rain swept in, extinguishing the candles one by one. In the sudden dark, the music box wound down to silence. Somewhere in the village, a church bell tolled 11, slow, deliberate, as though counting heartbeats. Miss Marple stepped into the storm, umbrella unfurled, the razor safe in her pocket. Behind her, the cottage exhaled centuries of secrets into the night, and the roses, those patient, thorny witnesses, bowed lower under the weight of the rain. Chapter 4. The knot untangled. The storm broke its leash just after midnight, hurling rain against the cottage windows like gravel thrown by an unseen hand. Inside the potting shed, a single hurricane lamp hissed on the workbench, its flame trembling in a glass chimney smeared with fingerprints. Miss Marple stood at the center of the circle of light, the straight razor balanced across her palm like a silver compass needle. Around her, the others formed a ragged constellation. Lionel soaked to the bone, Clara wringing her apron into a sodden rope, Dr. Harrow clutching his folio as though it were a life raft, Josiah with the trowel now cleaned and laid aside like a surrendered weapon. Jasper, older than time, younger than grief, leaned against the doorframe, greatcoat dripping, eyes fixed on the razor as if it might speak. Miss Marple closed the blade with a soft click. "Steel remembers," she said. "Every throat it has kissed, every lie it has shaved away. This one is innocent of Agatha's blood. The edge is honed for paper, not flesh. A letter opener from the Dower House library, I'd wager." Dr. Harrow swallowed audibly. Mrs. Wren kept it on her desk, beside the inkwell shaped like a dolphin. "Precisely." Miss Marple set the razor on the bench beside the bloodied trowel, the half-embroidered handkerchief, the naval medal. 4 objects, 4 voices, let them speak in turn. She lifted the handkerchief first. The crimson had dried to a brittle map. Under the lamp, it looked almost black. "Clara, you recognized the embroidery pattern the moment you saw the body. Your mother taught you the rose knot when you were 7. You stitched this square yourself, last night, after finding Agatha already dead." Clara's knees buckled. Lionel caught her elbow. I thought if the doctor took the blame, the police would look no further. He'd been pressing her to sell the M.R. James. I forged the stain with cochineal from the pantry, meant to plant it in his motor car." Her voice cracked. "I never meant harm, only to protect the house. She promised me." "Promises again," Miss Marple murmured, "the currency of the desperate." She turned to the trowel. "Josiah, you cut your thumb on the tin's edge at dawn, not in panic, but in calculation. You buried the second tin deeper, hoping the police would find only the photographs and assume a lover's quarrel. But you left the blood trail, deliberate breadcrumbs to lead us here, away from the greenhouse." Josiah's shoulders sagged. "The lilies," he said. "She wanted them for the altar. I cut them at first light. Found her then, in the conservatory, throat opened like a second mouth. I carried her to the rocking chair, thought it kinder than leaving her among the broken pots." Dr. Harrow made a strangled sound. "You moved the body. Good God, man." "Silence," Miss Marple said, not loudly. The antiquarian obeyed. She lifted the medal. The ribbon was frayed, but the silver bright. "Jasper Wren, you polished this every morning for 79 years. You returned not last night, but 3 weeks ago, when the cancer in your lungs finally spoke its verdict. Agatha gave you shelter in the old bothy beyond the orchard. You watched the village through field glasses, saw Lionel's surveyors, Heard Clara's tears when the sapphire brooch was promised elsewhere. You wrote the final letter, forgive me, and left it beneath the music box, knowing someone would find it. Jasper's eyes glistened. I wanted her to have peace, not this circus. Miss Marple's gaze settled on Lionel. And you, Mr. Wren. Jasper Lionel Wren the younger arrived yesterday, morning with a briefcase full of contracts and a heart full of arithmetic. You found your mother already dying, the letter opener in her hand. She had cut herself in despair, realizing the secret could no longer be kept. You finished what she began, not with malice, but with mercy. A deeper cut, swift, to spare her the slow bleed of scandal. Lionel's face crumpled. She begged me, said the pain was unbearable, that the truth would destroy us all. I held the blade steady. Then I arranged the handkerchief, thought it would look like an intruder. I never meant. He lunged, not at Miss Marple, but at the hurricane lamp. His elbow struck the bench. The lamp toppled, glass shattering, flame licking across spilled paraffin. Fire bloomed, hungry and orange. Josiah shouted. Clara screamed. Dr. Harrow stumbled backward into the seed trays, sending packets of lupin and sweet pea exploding like confetti. Miss Marple snatched the razor, the medal, the handkerchief, instinct, not sentiment, and shoved Clara toward the door. Jasper moved with surprising speed, hauling Lionel away from the flames. The shed became a furnace. Heat blistered paint. Smoke coiled like serpents. Miss Marple's knitting basket lay on the floor. She kicked it into the corner, away from the fire. Something inside clinked, the tin of letters. Safe. Outside, rain hissed on the corrugated roof. Miss Marple herded them into the deluge. The shed door slammed shut behind them, but not before a tongue of flame licked the threshold. Lightning stitched the sky in its glare. She saw the figure again, the hooded shape from the garden, now sprinting toward the orchard, a glint of steel in one hand. Stay here, she ordered the others. Josiah, the hose. She ran. Galoshes slipped on mud. Her mackintosh flapped like a broken wing. The orchard gate hung open. Chain snapped. Apple trees loomed, branches clawing at her face. She followed the footprints, small, neat, deeper on the left heel. A woman's tread, but not Clara's. The bothy crouched at the far end, a stone hut half swallowed by ivy. Its door stood ajar. Inside, a candle guttered on a crate. On the table lay a fifth handkerchief, pristine white, embroidered with a single word in Agatha's own hand. Enough. Miss Marple stepped inside. The air smelled of camphor and wet wool. In the corner, a camp bed bore the imprint of a body recently vacated. A naval cap, Jasper's spare, hung on a nail. Beside it, a woman's coat, still dripping. Footsteps behind her. She turned, razor ready. Constable Polk filled the doorway, helmet askew, lantern swinging. Miss Marple, the shed's ablaze. Good Lord, what's all this? Sanctuary, she said. And confession. She pointed to the table. Beneath the handkerchief lay a leather-bound journal, its pages swollen with rain. The last entry, in Agatha's spidery script, was dated yesterday. Jasper fades. Lionel comes tomorrow with papers to sell the land. I cannot bear the roses uprooted, the bothy raised. The cancer eats me as it eats him. Tonight I end it. The letter opener is sharp. Tell Clara the brooch is hers. Tell Josiah the garden is his. Tell my son I loved him enough to let him hate me. Burn this with the rest. Polk read aloud, voice faltering. Behind him, the others crowded the doorway. Jasper supported by Lionel. Clara's face streaked with rain and tears. Dr. Harrow's monocle fogged. Josiah clutching the hose like a lifeline. Miss Marple closed the journal. Agatha took her own life. Lionel found her, finished what pain had begun. The rest of you, each in your panic, embroidered the truth into something monstrous. She opened the razor, laid it beside the journal. No murder, only mercy, and the lies we tell to protect the dead. Silence fell, broken only by the rain drumming on the tin roof. The shed fire had burned itself out. Smoke curled into the night like a question mark. Park cleared his throat. I'll need statements. The coroner will record suicide, Miss Marple said. Agatha's note is clear. The handkerchiefs, the tins, the blood, all explainable. Let the village keep its ghosts. She stepped past them into the orchard. Dawn was a thin silver line on the horizon. The storm had spent itself. Roses nodded, heavy with water, their thorns glinting like tiny daggers. Miss Marple paused beneath the oldest tree, reached into her pocket, and drew out the bloody trowel. With deliberate care, she pressed its blade into the soft earth at the tree's roots. For remembrance, she said, and for peace. Behind her, the others followed Pork back toward the cottage, footsteps muffled in mud. Jasper lingered longest, hand on his son's shoulder. Lionel's tears mingled with the rain. Miss Marple watched them go, then opened her knitting basket. Inside, wrapped in the scarlet mitten, lay the naval medal and the final, pristine handkerchief. She tucked them into the hollow of the apple tree, wedged beside a knot in the bark. The orchard swallowed her secret. By the time the sun cleared the hedge, only the roses remained, silent, thorny, and utterly, perfectly still. Chapter 5. A Clean Fold. The morning after the storm, St. Mary's Hollow woke to a sky scrubbed clean, the colour of a robin's egg held to sunlight. Dew trembled on every leaf. The air carried the scent of wet brick and wood smoke from chimneys that had burned all night to dry the village's nerves. Miss Marple's cottage stood quiet, its thatch darkened to the shade of strong tea, the garden path swept free of mud by Josiah Bragg's early broom. No police tape fluttered. Constable Polk had removed it at dawn, muttering about respect for the bereaved. The shed was a blackened skeleton, roof collapsed inward like a broken rib cage, but the roses along the south wall had survived, petals luminous, thorns lacquered with rain. Miss Marple opened her front door at precisely 7:30, as she had every day for 40 years. She wore a dove grey cardigan over a sprig cotton dress, her hair pinned in a neat bun that defied the humidity. In one hand, she carried a wicker basket lined with checked linen. In the other, a pair of secateurs that glinted like a surgeon's scalpel. She paused on the step, inhaled the morning, and set to work. First, the lavender border. She snipped spent blooms with the precision of a watchmaker, dropping them into the basket where they released a faint, peppery ghost of summer. Next, the rosemary by the gate, 3 sturdy sprigs, enough for remembrance and for masking the lingering scent of smoke that clung to the curtains. She hummed as she worked, a tuneless fragment of greensleeves that made the blackbird in the laburnum tilt its head. Inside, the cottage had been restored to its former order. The rocking chair sat by the hearth, its cushion replaced with one stitched in soft sage green. The gate-leg table bore a fresh cloth, starched and ironed by Clara Pettigrew, who had arrived at 6 with red eyes and a determination to earn her keep until the funeral. The music box, its mechanism irreparably warped by rain, had been wrapped in tissue and placed in a drawer beside Agatha's sapphire brooch, now pinned to a square of black velvet for Clara to collect at her leisure. Miss Marple moved through the rooms like a curator closing an exhibition. She dusted the silver frame that had once held the scratched-out photograph. In its place now stood a simple vase of white lilies from the churchyard, their stamens dusted with gold. She opened windows to let the breeze chase out the last ghost of paraffin and blood. In the kitchen, she set a kettle to sing and laid out cups. 5, though only one would be used today. At 8:15, the postman's bicycle bell tinkled. Mr. Higgs dismounted, cap in hand, his usual cheer subdued. "Morning, Miss Marple. No letters, only this." He held out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, addressed in Agatha's spidery hand to the cottage for burning. Miss Marple accepted it with a nod. "Thank you, Mr. Higgs. Tea." He hesitated, glanced at the shed's ruin, then shook his head. "Best be off. Villagers talking." "Let them talk," she said gently. "Words are cheaper than silence, and twice as harmless." He pedalled away. Miss Marple carried the parcel to the hearth, where a small fire already crackled, kindling from the orchard, apple wood that smelled of cider and autumn. She unwrapped the paper. Inside lay a final tin smaller than the others, its lid sealed with crimson wax, a note pinned to the top read, "For Jane." The last thread, "Burn with the rest." A. She pried the lid free. A single handkerchief, purest white, monogrammed JM in Miss Marple's own youthful stitch, lay folded around a bundle of letters, each addressed to "My dearest boy" and signed "Mother." The ink had faded to lavender. The paper crackled like dry leaves. At the bottom rested a photograph, Agatha at 25, holding a newborn wrapped in a naval blanket, Jasper's hand on her shoulder, his face untouched by the razor this time. On the back, in pencil, "He never knew. Let him keep the garden." Miss Marple's breath caught, not in surprise, but in recognition. She had suspected the boy in the bothy was more than a groundsman's apprentice. The way he trimmed the yew hedge with naval precision, the way he saluted the flag at the war memorial each armistice day. But suspicion and certainty were different countries. She fed the letters to the flames one by one. They curled, blackened, became ash. The photograph she kept, slipping it into the drawer beside the music box. The handkerchief she folded into a perfect square, pressed it beneath a porcelain cat on the mantel, and turned the cat to face the wall. By 9, the cottage gleamed. Clara had left for the dower house to pack Agatha's clothes for the church jumble. Josiah was at the nursery choosing replacement roses. Peace, again, but a hardier strain. Dr. Harrow had taken the train to London with his folio and a promise to catalogue the M.R. James for the British Library, proceeds to the Cats Protection League. Lionel Wren the younger, had driven his father to the hospice in Much Benham, the naval greatcoat folded neatly on the back seat. They would scatter Agatha's ashes in the orchard at dusk, beneath the apple tree where secrets had taken root. Miss Marple locked the door behind her and walked to the village. The green was alive with cautious bustle. Women comparing storm damage, men inspecting roofs, children chasing a hoop that clattered like bones. She stopped at the bakery for a currant loaf, at the post office for stamps she did not need, at the church to leave a spray of rosemary on the font. Each transaction was small, ordinary, a stitch in the fabric of return. At 11, she sat on the bench beneath the war memorial and opened her knitting. The scarlet mitten was finished. Its pair lay half done in her lap, needles flashing. A shadow fell across the wool. Miss Marple. Constable Polk removed his helmet, turning it in his hands like a schoolboy. The coroner's verdict came through. Suicide, while the balance of her mind was disturbed. Case closed. She nodded. A kindness, Constable. The village will sleep easier. He hesitated. The handkerchiefs. Burn, I hope. Everyone, she lied smoothly. though I kept the embroidery patterns. Waste not, want not. Polk managed to smile. You'll be at the inquest. Tomorrow I'll bring scones. He left her to the sunshine. The needles clicked, the mitten grew. A breeze lifted the scent of warm bread from the bakery, mingled it with the sharper note of tar from the road menders, life resuming its rhythm. At noon, she returned home. The cottage felt larger, as though Agatha's absence had stretched the walls. Miss Marple brewed tea, Darjeeling, 1 sugar, a slice of lemon, and carried it to the parlour. She set the tray on the gate-leg table, poured a single cup, and placed it opposite her own on a lace doily. The empty chair waited. She sipped, eyes on the hearth. The fire had burned to embers. A single curl of ash lifted, danced, settled. From her pocket she drew the final pristine handkerchief, the one from the bothy, embroidered enough. She unfolded it, smoothed it across her knee. In the centre, faint as breath, was a watermark, the outline of a tiny hand, no larger than a child's. Miss Marple smiled. All threads accounted for, she said to the quiet room. She rose, crossed to the mantel, and opened the porcelain cat's secret drawer. Inside lay the naval medal, the photograph, and a small brass key, the one from the music box. She added the handkerchief, closed the drawer, and turned the cat to face the room again. Outside, the church bell struck 1. The sound rolled across the village like a stone skipped over water, touching every roof, every heart. Miss Marple locked the cottage door with a soft, decisive click. She hung the key on its hook beside the umbrella stand, slipped the secateurs into a basket, and stepped into the garden. The roses had opened fully now, their hearts gold as the morning. She knelt, pressed her palm to the earth beneath the apple tree, and felt the faint warmth of the meadow's hiding place. A robin landed on the fence, cocked its head, trilled once. Miss Marple answered with a whisper. "Peace," she said, "and rosemary for remembrance." She stood, brushed soil from her hands, and walked down the path. The gate closed behind her with the gentle finality of a book shutting. Lavender nodded in the breeze. The cottage settled into itself, secrets folded neat as linen in a drawer. Somewhere in the village, a child laughed, a dog barked, a kettle began to sing. Miss Marple did not look back. The pattern was finished, the handkerchief clean, the story complete.